I get this question constantly. Antonia, what order should I watch the Universal Monster movies in? Do I just go chronologically? Is there a best way to experience them? And I have found myself saying yes, but probably not in the way you would think because, yeah, you could watch the Universal Monster movies chronologically if you were trying to be historically accurate or if you wanted to see them the way Universal conceived of them. But if you are trying to fall in love with these monsters, if you are trying to understand them and really get why they had the impact that they had, there is a better way to watch them. So today I'm giving you the Universal Monster watch order that I have started recommending to everybody who asks, not by release year and not simply grouping by monster either, but instead honing in on the emotional storytelling behind each film. This order turns the films into one long, interconnected journey about identity, rejection, obsession, power, and legacy. It's a way to experience the monsters like you've never experienced them before. I'm Antonia Carlotta, and this is Universally Me, the channel for all things Universal and classic horror. My family started Universal Studios, and they made the Universal Monster movies. When Universal was making these films in the 1930s and 40s, they weren't setting out to build a cinematic universe. They were just responding to the world around them. The Great Depression, the trauma of World War I, anxiety around rapid scientific advancement, changing ideas about identity, psychology, morality, and then World War II. And of course, my cousin Junior Lemley, who was head of production at Universal, behind the scenes was grappling with his own fears. The untimely death of his mother, anxiety, mortality, OCD, and he probably didn't know it at the time, but he wasn't alone. That's a huge part of why so many people connected to his movies and why they still do today. So instead of watching these movies as a disconnected franchise, we're going to watch them as an emotional progression. Innocence, obsession, curses, and legacy. And I think watching this way will give you a whole new perspective, especially if you're new to the monsters. I think watching them this way might make the monster movies not feel so old. I think that you will find that the monsters and their meanings are shockingly relevant even today. First up, we have the innocent monster. Here we explore tragedy before terror. One thing that I love about the Universal Monsters is that the monster is often not the villain. Frankenstein. We have to begin with Frankenstein, not just because Frankenstein is iconic, but because the film established the emotional DNA of the entire cycle. James Whale directed a horror film, for sure, but he really directed a tragedy here. Boris Karloff plays the monster with such vulnerability. Audiences were terrified, but they connected to him too. Frankenstein came out during the Great Depression. People felt a loss of control and a loss of trust in the world. And science and medicine were rapidly advancing. And a question a lot of people were asking was, just because we can do something, should we? Behind the scenes, Uncle Carl, Junior Lemley's dad, was asking that very question of Junior himself. Junior believed in these monster movies, but his dad wasn't too convinced. He did get his dad to support him in making Universal's first supernatural monster, Dracula, earlier that year. But Uncle Carl wasn't convinced that Dracula's success wasn't just a fluke. Frankenstein was an incredible risk by Junior, and honestly, there are a lot of reasons it shouldn't have worked. It was too strange and morbid, and yet it became one of the most influential films ever made. After the success of Waterloo Bridge, James Whale was told he could pick any Universal project he wanted to direct, and he picked Frankenstein. And even though Bela Lugosi had been attached to play the monster, once James Whale came in, everything changed. Nobody will ever agree exactly what happened. Maybe Bela Lugosi quit because he didn't want to play a lumbering monster with an unrecognizable face and no lines. Maybe James Whale kicked Bela off the film in favor of Boris Karloff. I will give a shameless plug here for the book It's Alive. This is the very moment That It's Alive takes place. This is by my very good friend Julian David Stone, and it does such a good job exploring what all of the characters were going through leading up to the filming of Frankenstein. So I will leave a link here for anybody who wants to explore more of the story. Though Frankenstein is a monster film through and through, the monster is not really the monster, and the film has so much heart and teaches us empathy. Frankenstein is a masterpiece, and when you start your Universal Monster journey, start here. Bride of Frankenstein. Speaking of masterpiece, now we take it to the next level. The Bride of Frankenstein isn't just a sequel, it is so much more. That heart, that empathy, the message about love, loneliness, fear, abandonment, society's cruelty, the queer coding, the humor, everything is cranked up a notch here. James Whale was an openly gay man in Hollywood at a time when that could have been a career killer, and he infused a lot of his views and humor into The Bride of Frankenstein. The monster grows and really evolves in this movie. He starts speaking, and he experiences friendship for the first time. And of course, he experiences rejection and heartbreak. Elsa Lanchester makes 2 appearances in the film, in the opening as Mary Shelley, and then at the end as our iconic bride. She modeled her performance as the bride off of swans that she saw at a park, and it brings something so unique to the character that nobody else could have done. Just like the Frankenstein monster, the bride is a monster that's not really a monster. She was created to fulfill this role as the monster's mate, and she rejects that role. And even though she's on screen less than 5 minutes, she is still just as recognizable as all of the other monsters we'll talk about today. And the bride is still inspiring movies 90 years later. There were more than 4 years between Frankenstein and The Bride of Frankenstein, as Universal tried to convince James Whale to make another Frankenstein film, and while they tried to figure out what version of the story they wanted to tell. James Whale said no to a ton of scripts before he finally said yes. So even though The Bride of Frankenstein comes later in the Universal Monsters cycle, it should be second on your list. Creature from the Black Lagoon. Now we're really jumping forward in time. Creature from the Black Lagoon came out almost 20 years after The Bride of Frankenstein, but emotionally, it fits this chapter perfectly. By the 1950s, Universal wasn't run by my family anymore. The studio system has changed, and the atomic age has begun. Fear isn't just Gothic castles and European villages anymore. It's nature, science, and the exotic Amazon. Instead of a vampire, an undead creature, or a magic potion, Creature from the Black Lagoon is about science and nature. The creature isn't evil, he's lonely and curious. He didn't seek out these scientists, they came to him, and he's responding to their intrusion. The creature is the only Universal monster played by 2 different actors, Ben Chapman on land and Rico Browning underwater. The story was inspired by a dinner party where producer William Alland dined with Orson Welles, Dolores Del Rio, and Mexican cinematographer Gabriel Figueroa, who shared a legend of a half-human, half-fish creature living in the Amazon River that once a year would take a woman from a nearby village. And the story also takes on a little bit of inspiration from Beauty and the Beast. When Creature from the Black Lagoon first came out, 3D films were having something of a moment. And actually, if you are lucky enough to live in LA, every now and again I will still see 3D screenings of the films pop up. Though Creature from the Black Lagoon was the last of the Universal monsters, it is one of my favorites. And in some ways, it really feels to me like a cousin of the Frankenstein monster. Not created by man, but certainly trying to understand it. Next up, the obsessive monsters. These monsters are no longer innocent. They are making choices. They are driven, and they are terrifying no matter what way you look at it. Dracula. Let's talk about the monster who knows exactly what he is. Bela Lugosi's Dracula is elegant, intentional, and controlled. He's not confused, he's certainly not innocent, and he is in no way misunderstood. There's something so magnetic and seductive about him. Dracula is the Universal monster movie that really kicked off the franchise. Universal had dabbled in horror in previous years, movies like The Phantom of the Opera or The Cat and the Canary, but Dracula was the first supernatural film. It couldn't be explained away. At the end, Dracula really is a vampire. Junior Lemley himself was obsessed with life and death, with dark and the macabre. His mom died suddenly when he was 11 years old, and he struggled with anxiety and OCD. Dracula, too, is obsessed with Mina. He's dangerous and charismatic, hypnotizing, mesmerizing, and he belongs here thematically because he's not a victim of circumstance, not an accident. Dracula is a monster who embraces his identity. The Mummy. Speaking of obsession, let's talk about The Mummy. After the success of both Dracula and Frankenstein, Uncle Carl was finally on board with Junior's monster movies. The Mummy's the first one not directly based on a book, but was rather capitalizing on the Egyptology craze at the time. The public was fascinated after the discovery of King Tut's tomb the decade earlier. Boris Karloff had, of course, just played Frankenstein the previous year, and his ascent to fame was insane. He went from being billed as just a question mark in Frankenstein, not even invited to the premiere, to having his name on the poster as big as the title for The Mummy. The opening scene of The Mummy is probably the most famous. Karloff, wrapped in bandages, awakens after centuries, terrifying the living daylights out of the archaeologist who said those cursed words. His performance as Ardith Bey is played with such restraint, slow, serious, and haunting. He's not a monster raging through villages, nor does he have the charm and charisma of Dracula. This is a man who has waited thousands of years for his love, and he will do anything to get her back. The Mummy fits perfectly here, where love is fixation and possession. The Invisible Man. Now the obsession turns inward. Dracula is obsessed with Mina. The Mummy is obsessed with his oxynomen. And in The Invisible Man, Claude Rains' Jack Griffin, he's not driven by love, but ego. He loves himself. The Invisible Man is the deadliest of the Universal monsters. He has the highest kill count by far. But despite all the terror, James Whale still managed to infuse his signature humor and fun into the film as well. Some of its themes even mirror Frankenstein, the consequences of playing God, that question of just because we can do something, should we? But the Invisible Man isn't turning those questions on someone else. Jack Griffin is thinking about Jack Griffin. He goes mad with power. The Invisible Man is so clearly not a tragic figure. He is dark, dangerous, and obsessed. The Cursed Monster. They can't escape their fate, and it's heartbreaking. Phantom of the Opera. I really struggled not putting Phantom of the Opera earlier. I even almost opened the entire video with Hunchback of Notre Dame and Phantom of the Opera because they are like the proto-monster movies. They came out first and they influenced everything else. But I also struggled because they're also kind of not monster movies. I find The Hunchback of Notre Dame so human and so tragic that I'm not even including that film on this list, but it is very much still worth a watch. But Phantom, though tragic and cursed in some ways, is still pretty monstrous in my book. Phantom of the Opera stars one of the most famous faces of the silent era, Lon Chaney, also known as the Man of 1,000 Faces. He was a master of makeup, and he completely transformed himself for every role he took on. He designed the Phantom's makeup himself, using wires and prosthetics, false teeth, and more to appear almost skull-like. The unmasking scene is one of the most famous moments in silent film history, and as much as it was the shock of the Phantom's face itself, it also represented something more. Isolation, bitterness, obsession, and this desperate wish to be seen and loved, or at least accepted. Historically, this was one of Universal's biggest prestige films of the silent era. Massive sets, a huge production, and it really laid the groundwork for the future Universal monsters, particularly the seeds of obsession that later defined Dracula and the Mummy. But still, the Phantom is very much a cursed figure. The Wolfman. And speaking of cursed, let's move on to a generational curse in more ways than one. Larry Talbot is the most emotionally modern character in the entire Universal monster canon. The Wolfman is a fantastic father-son story. It's a movie about shame, about inheritance, about fearing yourself, and desperately wanting to be good and believing you can't be. Kurt Siodmak, the writer, in fact saw himself as the Wolfman. As a Jew in Germany who had to flee for his safety, he felt forced into a fate that he didn't want. And Lon Chaney Jr., he was no stranger to feeling cursed either. I've talked at length in other videos about his relationship with his dad and his struggles with alcohol. Lon Chaney Jr. brings something so painfully sincere to the role, so raw. He doesn't want to be the Wolfman, and he doesn't want to hurt anyone. And more than anything, he wants his father to believe him and to help him. This is a monster who never chose his fate, and unfortunately, his tragedy is his destiny. Dracula's Daughter. Oh, how I love this movie. Dracula's Daughter is another example of someone wishing they could escape their generational curse, and she is our first female monster with lines and significant screen time. Dracula's Daughter is one of the last movies my family touched at Universal, and it's one of those movies that you can watch over and over and find something new each time. Countess Zaleska, played by Gloria Holden, is introduced immediately after the events of Dracula, literally dealing with the aftermath of her father's death. Countess Zaleska doesn't want to be cursed with vampirism. She wants to be normal. There's a fascinating undercurrent to Dracula's Daughter that makes it so much more real to many who watch it. It has really strong queer themes and themes of identity, repression, and forbidden desire. Sometimes it's left for the audience to interpret, and sometimes it is really overt. Dracula's Daughter came out a few years before The Wolfman, and it's certainly remembered less today than The Wolfman, but they are absolutely connected. Countess Zaleska is tragic because she is trying so hard not to be a vampire. She is trapped in this body and in this identity that she didn't choose. And I think we can all relate to that. We have all felt that at some time or another. Let's keep it going with the kids. Dracula's Daughter, and now Son of Frankenstein. With Son of Frankenstein, we dig deeper into legacy. Basil Rathbone's Wolf von Frankenstein is living under the weight of a name he didn't choose, a reputation he didn't create, and a story he can't escape. Bela Lugosi is at his peak as Igor in Son of Frankenstein. He is absolutely hilarious. And then there's the monster, played by Boris Karloff in his third and final turn in the role. Son of Frankenstein is almost the opposite of Larry Talbot in The Wolfman, holding his dad in such high regard. He wants to prove his family name doesn't have to mean failure. And I guess he starts the movie trying to escape a legacy, but you can't run from it forever. When Myths Collide. The monster universe awakens. Frankenstein meets the Wolfman. Frankenstein meets the Wolfman is the start of the cinematic universe. Like literally the first ever. The first monster mash, if you will. Our boy Larry Talbot wants nothing more than to be able to die forever. He believes Dr. Frankenstein's notes may have the answer to his problem and awakens the monster from a block of ice to help him find them. This movie isn't perfect, but it is revolutionary. The first time two monsters from two totally different movies were meeting. Today, it feels like everything is a franchise. Everything is a crossover. Freddy versus Jason, Alien versus Predator, even the DC and Marvel cinematic universes. Universal was the first one to realize that monsters didn't need to stay in their own lanes, and it absolutely changed movies forever. Abbott and Costello meet Frankenstein. Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein is my favorite monster mashup. Universal continued with the monster mashups in the 1940s with House of Dracula and House of Frankenstein, neither of which are my favorite. The 1940s were kind of an era where Universal was just churning out these monster movies, but not necessarily making art. They were collecting paychecks. But with Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein in 1948, we get something legitimately good. And this movie is a big part in cementing the monsters in pop culture and making them truly immortal. I can't tell you how many people have told me that Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein was their introduction to the Universal monsters. And even last year, when I introduced this film at the Old Town Music Hall, I saw so many kids in the audience. Like, this movie might still be people's introduction to the Universal monsters. Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein is fun, it's funny, it gives the monsters a chance to escape their tragedies and become something else, almost the way that we love Scooby-Doo today. And after the emotional journey that we have traversed through the rest of the Universal Monster universe, it's maybe the best way we can end. In a good mood, having a good time with monsters we are now connected to and in some cases we've learned to love. These old monster movies, pretty much all of them, are more than just monster movies. They're metaphors and stories about humanity and what happens when we create life, when we lose control, when we inherit burdens, when we reject each other or reject ourselves. There are a few movies that I intentionally left off the list, so I'm curious if you know what they are and where you think they would fit. Tell me in the comments. Don't forget, paid members get bonus videos, pictures, and more. I've got a whole bunch of new content for members only that I am just about to start putting up, so go join. It's the best way to support Universally Me. Thank you so much for watching. Bye.